Ma'am, this is a tactical training facility, not a kindergarten playground. Perhaps you should leave the real work to actual operators. The voice dripped with condescension as Staff Sergeant Marcus Pike looked down at the woman standing quietly at the edge of the breaching range, her weathered hands wrapped around a standard-issue M4 carbine. The assembled SEAL candidates chuckled nervously, some shifting uncomfortably as they watched the interaction unfold. She didn't respond to his mockery, didn't even acknowledge the insult that hung heavy in the salt-tinged Virginia Beach air. Instead, she simply adjusted her stance with the kind of minute precision that only comes from thousands of hours of muscle memory, her breathing steady as morning mist over calm water. But when Lieutenant Commander Harrison saw the way she indexed her trigger finger along the receiver, saw the subtle cant of her hip that perfectly distributed the weapon's weight, something cold ran down his spine. If you believe that silence speaks louder than arrogance, type respect below. The morning had started like any other at Naval Special Warfare Development Group's Advanced Tactical Training Compound. 24 SEAL candidates, each already proven warriors with multiple deployments under their belts, had assembled for their final qualification course in close-quarters battle tactics. The exercise was designed to push even these elite operators to their limits. A complex multi-room clearance scenario with live ammunition, hostile targets mixed with civilian mannequins, and a strict 90-second completion window that had never been successfully achieved by a single operator working alone. Pike had been running this course for 6 years, had seen hundreds of America's finest warriors struggle through it, and he took particular pride in his ability to spot who would succeed and who would wash out within seconds of meeting them. When the small woman in civilian clothes had walked onto the range carrying a visitor's pass and a worn rifle case, he'd immediately categorized her as another Pentagon pencil pusher sent to observe and write reports about training methods she couldn't possibly understand. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothing unremarkable tactical pants, and a faded black polo shirt that had seen better days. No unit patches, no rank insignia, no indication whatsoever of military service beyond the authorized visitor badge clipped to her belt. Pike had loudly questioned why she was even allowed to handle a weapon on his range, making sure his voice carried across the entire training area so every candidate could hear his disdain for this obvious waste of their valuable training time. She had simply produced a single sheet of paper from her back pocket, a training authorization form signed by someone so high up the chain of command that Pike couldn't even identify the signature, only the official seal that accompanied it. The form authorized full access to all facilities and equipment, but provided no name, no unit designation, no explanation for her presence. Pike had examined it 3 times, growing more frustrated with each reading, before finally accepting that someone far above his pay grade had decided this civilian deserved to play soldier for a day. He'd assigned her the most basic loadout available, a standard M4 with iron sights while the SEALs ran holographic optics, no tactical vest while they wore full-plate carriers, no radio while they coordinated through encrypted comms, no support equipment while they carried breaching charges and flashbangs. If she wanted to embarrass herself trying to keep up with Tier 1 operators, he would make sure the lesson in humility was particularly memorable. The candidates had begun their runs, each executing the course with impressive skill but falling short of the impossible time standard, the best managing to clear only 3 of the 5 rooms before the buzzer announced their failure. Pike provided loud commentary after each attempt, pointing out minor tactical errors and missed shots with the kind of brutal honesty that special operations training demanded. When her turn came, she walked to the starting position with measured steps that seemed almost leisurely compared to the aggressive energy the SEALs had displayed. She performed a brief function check on the rifle with movements so subtle that most observers missed them entirely. A gentle press on the forward assist, a silent test of the selector switch, a quick visual inspection of the chamber that took less than a second. Pike loudly announced to the gathered trainees that they were about to witness why civilian observers should stick to their desk jobs, why real tactical work required years of training and natural warrior instinct that couldn't be learned from books or weekend shooting courses. She took her position at the breach point, the rifle held in a perfect low ready that looked almost casual in its ease, her finger indexed precisely along the receiver, her breathing so controlled it seemed she wasn't breathing at all. The range safety officer looked to Pike for confirmation, clearly uncomfortable with allowing an unknown civilian to attempt such a dangerous live-fire exercise. Pike waved dismissively, eager to see this overconfident visitor realize exactly how out of her depth she truly was. The buzzer sounded, its harsh electronic tone cutting through the morning air like a starting pistol, and in that instant, everything changed. She moved through the door with a fluidity that defied physics, the rifle snapping up to her shoulder in a motion so fast it seemed like special effects. The first room contained 3 targets, 2 hostiles and 1 civilian, positioned in a deliberately confusing pattern that forced operators to process threat identification in milliseconds. Her rifle spoke twice, 2 shots so close together they sounded like a single extended crack, and both hostile targets sprouted perfect center mass holes while the civilian mannequin remained untouched. She was already moving before the brass casings hit the ground, flowing into the second room with a swimmer's grace that made her seem to glide rather than run. This room was the course's first real test. 5 targets scattered at different elevations, some partially concealed behind furniture, all requiring precise shots from awkward angles. Her rifle tracked from target to target with mechanical precision, each trigger pulled deliberate and devastating. The rhythm of her shooting creating an almost musical pattern that experienced operators would later describe as the most perfect display of combat marksmanship they had ever witnessed. She transitioned to her pistol without conscious thought as she entered the third room, the rifle swinging smoothly to her back on its sling as her sidearm cleared leather in one continuous motion. The narrow hallway required speed over precision, close targets that would be deadly if given even a fraction of a second to react. 9 shots, 9 targets. Each hit exactly where a human's combat effectiveness would be instantly terminated, the entire engagement lasting less time than it took most people to consciously recognize threats. The fourth room was designed to be impossible, a hostage scenario with the civilian target positioned directly in front of the hostile, only the hostile's weapon hand, and a sliver of skull visible from the entry angle. Every SEAL who had attempted it had either taken too long to line up the shot or risked hitting the hostage, most choosing to use a flashbang to create separation. She entered at a dead sprint, her body dropping into a baseball slide that would have been absurd if it hadn't been so perfectly executed, the pistol extended in a one-handed grip as she passed beneath the civilian mannequin's position. The single shot was impossible, threading between the hostage's arm and torso to strike the hostile target in the exact center of the 2-inch exposed portion of the skull, a shot that would have been considered lucky on a static range with unlimited time, let alone while sliding across a concrete floor at full speed. She was already on her feet before the slide's momentum died, moving toward the final room with the kind of purpose that suggested she had run this exact course 1,000 times before. The last chamber was Pike's masterpiece of tactical cruelty. 12 targets at varying distances, elevations, and angles, some moving on mechanical tracks, others dropping from the ceiling on timers, all intermixed with civilian mannequins that would appear and disappear through doorways and windows. It required perfect situational awareness, instant threat discrimination, and a level of marksmanship that pushed human capability to its absolute limit. She entered the room, and time seemed to slow, her movements taking on an almost supernatural quality as she engaged each target with a precision that transcended mere skill. The rifle was back in her hands, having materialized there through some sleight of hand that no observer could later adequately describe, and it spoke in a steady rhythm that was simultaneously aggressive and controlled. She moved in a complex pattern through the room, using angles and cover in ways that violated conventional tactical doctrine, but worked with devastating effectiveness, each position giving her clear shots at multiple targets while denying them any opportunity to return fire. A hostile target dropped from the ceiling directly above her. Without looking up, she inverted the rifle and fired blind over her shoulder, the round catching the target's center mass before it had fallen 6 inches. 2 movers crossed paths at the far end of the room, their mechanical movement designed to create an optical illusion that made precise shooting nearly impossible. She tracked them with tiny micro-adjustments of her stance, firing 4 shots that looked wild, but each found their mark with surgical precision. A civilian mannequin popped up directly in her line of fire as she engaged a hostile. She shifted her point of aim by millimeters, the round passing so close to the civilian that it left powder burns on the mannequin's shirt while still achieving a lethal hit on the hostile behind it. The final target was Pike's cruelest joke, a hostile that would only appear for exactly 1/2 second in a mirror's reflection, requiring the shooter to engage a target they couldn't directly see. She was already positioned for it, had been since she entered the room, every other movement deliberately calculated to put her in the exact spot needed for this shot. The target appeared, her rifle was already aimed at the precise angle, and the shot shattered both the mirror and the target behind it in a display of tactical geometry that would be studied in training videos for years to come. The buzzer sounded again, its harsh tone now carrying a different meaning entirely. 53 seconds. She had completed the entire course in 53 seconds, 37 seconds faster than the requirement, faster than anyone had thought physically possible for a single operator. The range fell into absolute silence. 24 of America's most elite warriors standing frozen in disbelief, their minds trying to process what they had just witnessed. Pike's face had drained of all color, his mouth hanging open in an expression that would have been comical if not for the genuine shock behind it. She safed her weapon with the same casual efficiency she had shown throughout, dropping the magazine and locking the bolt open for inspection, then set it gently in the rack with a reverence that suggested the rifle was an old friend deserving of respect. Still, she said nothing, made no acknowledgement of what she had just accomplished, simply stood there with the patient stillness of someone waiting for a bus. Lieutenant Commander Harrison was the first to move, walking slowly toward the range computer that recorded all shots and times, his hands actually trembling as he pulled up the data. Every shot was documented in digital precision. 53 rounds fired, 53 perfect hits, 0 civilian casualties, 0 missed shots, 0 tactical errors, completed in a time that the computer's programming had to be overridden to accept as valid. Harrison turned to Pike, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from leading men in combat for 2 decades. He spoke quietly, but in the silence of the range, every word carried perfectly. Pull her file. Now, Pike's hands shook as he accessed the secure terminal, inputting the identification number from her visitor's pass, watching as the screen populated with classification warnings that grew progressively more severe with each layer of security. When the file finally opened, it required Harrison's command authorization to proceed, then demanded biometric confirmation, then warned that accessing this information without proper need to know would result in federal prosecution. The first page was mostly black redaction marks, but what was visible was enough to make Pike's knees actually buckle. Master Chief Sarah Chun, the document read, though even the name seemed to shimmer with uncertainty as if it might be one of many she had used. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Tier 1 operator, 22 years of service with 18 of those classified beyond even Pike's substantial clearance level. The visible operations list read like a history of America's most sensitive military actions: Somalia, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and a dozen other locations that were listed only as geographic coordinates. Her qualification list required 3 pages just for the headers. Expert marksman in 17 different weapon systems, advanced certifications in demolitions, communications, emergency medicine, high-altitude operations, combat diving, tactical driving, close-quarters combat instruction, and qualifications Pike had never even heard of despite his years in special operations. But it was the final visible section that made Harrison actually remove his cover in a gesture of profound respect. Chun had been the lead instructor for Naval Special Warfare's Advanced Sniper course for 6 years, had literally written the manual on urban combat tactics that every SEAL trained from, had developed the very shooting techniques that Pike taught to his students without knowing their origin. The photograph attached to the file was 12 years old, but unmistakably her, though in it she wore the trident of a Navy SEAL and enough ribbons to cover half her chest, including a Navy Cross, 2 silver stars, and a Purple Heart with 4 oak leaf clusters indicating 5 separate combat wounds in service to her country. Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Jesus Christ, Pike. This is Sarah Chun. The Sarah Chun. She's the one who took out that HVT in Hellman with a pistol shot from 200 meters. She's the one who held off 60 Taliban fighters for 6 hours with nothing but a damaged rifle and 3 magazines. She's the reason half these kids are alive, because she developed the tactics they use every single day. The assembled SEALs had moved closer, drawn by the gravity of Harrison's words, and one of them, a young operator fresh from his third deployment, actually gasped when he heard the name. Chun was a legend in the special operations community, a ghost story that instructors told to humble, cocky operators, a standard of excellence that seemed too perfect to be real. Pike stood frozen, his mind replaying every dismissive word he had spoken, every insult he had broadcast to the entire range. The woman he had mocked as a kindergarten teacher had more combat experience than every person on the range combined. The visitor he had tried to humiliate had literally invented the techniques he claimed to master. His voice came out as barely more than a croak. "Master Chief. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for the first time since arriving." She spoke, her voice carrying a quiet authority that needed no volume to command attention. "I know you didn't, Staff Sergeant." That was rather the point. She turned to address the gathered SEALs, her presence somehow filling the entire range despite her small stature. "Gentlemen, the enemy doesn't announce their capabilities with patches and ribbons. They don't wear their qualifications on their sleeves or broadcast their experience with swagger and volume. The most dangerous person in any room is usually the quietest one, the one you dismiss, the one you underestimate because they don't match your preconceived notion of what a warrior looks like." She paused, letting her words sink in, then continued with a slight smile that transformed her entire face. "I'm 51 years old. I've been retired for 3 years. I teach middle school science now, and I came here today because Admiral Morrison asked me to evaluate your training program. You want to know what I've learned? You're teaching tactics well enough, but you're failing to teach the most important lesson of all: humility and the danger of assumptions." The transformation in Pike was immediate and complete. He snapped to attention with a precision that would have made a drill instructor proud, his hand rising in a salute that carried 20 years of military tradition and newfound respect. One by one, every SEAL on the range followed suit, 24 of America's finest warriors saluting a small, gray-haired woman in civilian clothes. Chun returned the salute with the same casual precision she had shown with the rifle, then did something unexpected. She laughed, a warm, genuine sound that broke the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. "At ease, gentlemen. Save the formality for someone who needs it. I'm here to help you become better operators, not to pull rank or tell war stories." She walked among them now, her entire demeanor shifting to that of a teacher, pointing out positions in the course where they could improve, demonstrating subtle adjustments to their shooting stances that would shave crucial seconds off their times. She spent an hour with them, sharing knowledge that couldn't be found in any manual, techniques developed through 2 decades of combat that had been paid for in blood and sacrifice. The SEALs absorbed every word like sponges, their notebooks filling with observations and insights that would reshape their entire approach to tactical operations. As word spread through the Naval Special Warfare compound, a crowd began to gather. Officers and enlisted, instructors and students, all drawn by the impossible story of someone completing Pike's impossible course in under a minute. By noon, the range was packed with observers watching Chun run demonstration after demonstration, each one executed with different weapons and techniques to showcase the full spectrum of tactical possibilities. She ran it with just a pistol in 62 seconds. She ran it weak-handed in 70 seconds. She ran it in full combat loadout with a plate carrier and helmet in 58 seconds, actually faster than her original run despite the additional weight. Each run was a masterclass in combat efficiency, a living textbook of tactics and techniques that challenged everything the observers thought they knew about close-quarters combat. The base photographer arrived and captured what would become one of the most famous images in naval special warfare history. Chun standing among 24 SEALs, all of them looking at her with expressions of absolute reverence, while she demonstrated a shooting stance that would later be officially designated the Chun Modified Weaver in tactical manuals. Pike stood beside her in the photograph, his transformation from arrogant gatekeeper to humble student captured forever in digital permanence. The afternoon brought the Admiral himself, Morrison arriving in his dress whites despite the Virginia heat, his chest heavy with ribbons from 30 years of service. He watched Chun run the course one more time, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile as she finished in 51 seconds, actually improving her time with repetition. When she approached him after safing her weapon, he didn't shake her hand or offer casual greeting. Instead, this three-star admiral, commander of all naval special warfare, rendered a salute that would have been appropriate for the president himself. Master Chief Chun, he said formally, loud enough for everyone to hear. The Navy owes you a debt that can never be properly repaid. Your contributions to our tactical development have saved more lives than we can count. It's an honor to have you here, and I hope you'll consider making this a regular occurrence. Chin's response was typically understated. Sir, the honor is mine. These men are the future of special operations. If I can help even one of them survive their next deployment, then my time here is well spent, the admiral nodded, then turned to Pike with an expression that promised a very different kind of conversation later. Staff Sergeant, I trust you'll be modifying your training approach based on what you've learned today? Pike's "yes, sir" could probably have been heard in Washington. As the sun began to set over Virginia Beach, casting long shadows across the tactical range, Chun prepared to leave. The SEALs had formed an impromptu honor guard, 2 lines of warriors creating a pathway to her rental car. As she walked between them, each operator she passed rendered a salute, not because protocol demanded it, but because respect compelled it. Pike waited at the end of the line, and when she reached him, he did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He removed his Special Warfare Instructor badge, the pin he had worn with insufferable pride for 6 years, and offered it to her. Master Chief, I've been teaching tactics wrong. I've been teaching skills when I should have been teaching mindset. I've been creating operators who know how to shoot, but not warriors who know when not to. This belongs to someone who understands what really matters. Chun looked at the badge for a long moment, then gently closed Pike's fingers back around it. Keep it, Staff Sergeant. But remember what you learned today. The most dangerous warriors are the ones who have nothing to prove. Teach them to be quiet professionals, not loud operators. Teach them that respect is earned through actions, not demanded through volume. And most importantly, teach them to never, ever underestimate someone based on appearance alone. Word of the day's events spread through the special operations community like wildfire. The story grew with each telling, but for once, the reality was more impressive than the legend. Videos of Chin's run were classified for training purposes only, but every special operations unit in the American military requested copies. The course that had been considered impossible became the standard that every operator strove to match, though it would be 3 years before anyone came within 10 seconds of Chin's time. Pike transformed overnight from an arrogant instructor to one of the most effective teachers in naval special warfare, his newfound humility and revised training methods producing operators who were not just more skilled, but more thoughtful, more aware, more dangerous in their quiet professionalism. The phrase, "Remember Chun," became an unofficial motto among the SEALs who had been there that day, a reminder to never judge a book by its cover, never assume superiority based on appearance, never forget that the most lethal warriors often looked the least threatening. Chin returned to her middle school classroom the following Monday, where she taught 7th graders about physics and momentum, using examples that might have seemed surprisingly specific to anyone who knew her background. Her students knew her as Ms. Chun, the science teacher who never raised her voice but somehow commanded absolute respect, who could explain complex concepts with remarkable clarity, who moved through the classroom with an odd grace that made her seem to appear wherever she was needed most. They didn't know about the Navy Cross hidden in a box in her closet, didn't know about the operations that had shaped modern military tactics, didn't know that their mild-mannered teacher had once been one of the most dangerous humans on the planet. But sometimes, when a student was struggling with self-doubt or facing bullies who mocked their appearance, Ms. Chin would pull them aside and share a piece of wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than teaching credentials. The people who need to announce how tough they usually aren't. Real strength is quiet. Real confidence doesn't need to prove itself. And the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is to let them, right up until the moment you prove them absolutely wrong. A year later, Pike received a package with no return address. Inside was a challenge coin, the kind special operators exchange to commemorate shared experiences. One side showed a rifle sight picture, the crosshairs centered on perfection. The other side bore a simple inscription, Quiet professionals don't need volume. He would carry that coin for the rest of his career, pulling it out whenever a young operator got too cocky, whenever someone made assumptions based on appearance, whenever he needed to remind himself that the most important lessons often came from the most unexpected teachers. The tactical range was eventually renamed the Chun Training Complex, though she never knew about the honor, would have probably laughed at the formality of it. But every operator who passed through those doors learned the story, watched the impossible video, understood that excellence wasn't about what you could prove to others, but about what you demanded from yourself. The loudest voice in the room was rarely the most dangerous. The biggest person was seldom the strongest. And sometimes, just sometimes, a quiet middle school teacher could remind America's deadliest warriors what it truly meant to be a quiet professional. The legend of Sarah Chun became more than just a story about marksmanship or tactical excellence. It became a parable about the danger of arrogance, the power of humility, and the importance of never underestimating the silent figure standing at the edge of the room. Because true warriors didn't need to announce their presence with bravado and bluster. They announced it with actions that spoke louder than any words ever could, with a competence so complete it required no explanation, with a confidence so profound it needed no external validation. Chun had demonstrated something more important than how to clear a room in 53 seconds. She had shown them how to carry themselves with the quiet dignity of those who have nothing to prove because their actions have already proven everything. She had taught them that respect wasn't something you demanded through rank or volume or intimidation. It was something you earned through excellence, maintained through humility, and shared through teaching others to be better than yourself. In the end, that was her greatest victory. Not the impossible time on the course, not the perfect marksmanship, not even the humbling of Pike's arrogance. It was the transformation of 24 SEALs who left that range understanding that being a quiet professional wasn't just about tactical skill. It was about knowing that your worth wasn't determined by how loud you could shout, but by how silently you could excel. For more stories where earned respect triumphs over empty arrogance, and where quiet competence defines a warrior's worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.